Hi, today I want to talk about the importance of using calligraphy quality paper for your practice and when you're working. So a lot of people feel like when they're practicing they don't want to waste their money and use a nicer quality paper. And the truth is that with calligraphy there's so many things that you have to think about while you're writing. Is your ink too thin? Is your paper going to hold the ink well? How do I form the letters? When do I press down harder? There's so much to think about, and using tools that work well together are just going to make your practice such a more fun experience, and you're going to get better at it faster. So one time one of our students said, well, I'm not there yet. But the truth is that you're never actually going to get there if you're not using tools that work well together. So if you just pull out random sheets of Xerox quality paper from your printer or your copier, you're gonna have a completely different experience than you would if you're using something that is specifically geared for calligraphy. All the paper in our shop are calligraphy quality paper geared to work with the inks and the pens that we have in our shop. So it just makes it easier, and it takes the guesswork out of how to get the right formula between your ink and your nib and your paper. So let's talk a little bit about it. Okay, so let's say that you just got started with your calligraphy and you decided that you're gonna just pull paper straight from your printer. This is actually low quality printer paper. And you went to Michael's and you picked up Higgins Eternal ink, which is a great ink, by the way. It's very smooth and fluid, but it's also a thinner ink. So it has a thinner consistency and it's more prone to bleeding. So let's see how those work together. So we're gonna dip our nib in, and we're gonna get started writing. You can't get a fine hairline. You can see immediately that the edges of my letters are bleeding outward. The ink is literally pulling outward in the paper. This is a low quality paper, and the ink just does not sit on it. It completely becomes absorbed into the paper and pulls outward. So it's not ideal. Okay, let's look at it with the ink from our shop. So our ink is manufactured by Ziller. It's also a great ink. It's a little bit thicker. It's acrylic based. It works great. We're gonna dip it and we're gonna try again. So you can see it doesn't bleed as much, but I don't have a fine hairline. All my lines look exactly the same. The downstroke looks a little bit thicker, but this hairline is much thicker than I would personally prefer. So let's look at it with the paper from our shop. So the paper from our shop, you can see compared to this printer paper, it's a little bit off-white. It's not bleached white. And it has cotton in it, and the cotton is going to help to absorb the ink a little bit less, so the ink literally sits on top of the paper rather than soaking down and out into the paper. So you can see right away the hairline, the upstroke is much finer than it was on the cheap copy paper. Can you see the difference between that hairline and that one? That's what we're going for, a nice fine hairline. You can also see the difference between your hairline and your heavy downstroke. So this is with the ink from our shop. It just sits much better on the page. And it makes your practice a lot more fun when you're not thinking, why does my writing look so terrible? It's probably not you, it's the paper combination. So the important thing is that when you're practicing, you use quality tools that are specifically curated for beginners, or, even beyond beginner, so that you don't have to troubleshoot everything. You're already thinking about, where do I put my light line? Where do I put my heavy line? How do I get my ink not to blob out? Am I pressing too hard? It gets confusing. So it just makes it a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable when you're not trying to fight with your tools to get them to work properly. So again, what would you rather practice with? This, where your calligraphy looks really nice, or this, where it's just a big bleeding mess? I think I would prefer the paper with the cotton in it, the calligraphy quality paper. So just remember that if you're finding that your ink is bleeding, the first thing you want to check is your paper. Is your paper quality good enough? Does it have cotton in it? And the second thing you might want to look at is the type of ink that you're using, thick enough to be writing on your paper. So again, there are some inks that are thinner by nature and they are more apt to bleeding. So if you're using that kind of ink, you might want to invest in a little bit of a thicker quality ink so that it sits on the paper a little bit better. And as always, if you're interested in any of the resources that we mentioned in this video, make sure you check the links below, and always be sure to check out our blog for tips for beginner calligraphers and beyond. Thank you. Bye.